Hi, I'm Jeff Klineman with BevNET and Brewbound, and I'm here for the afternoon session of the Livestream Lounge, brought to you by the good folks at Evans Brewing. I have here with me our old friend Craig Farlie of Farlie Turner and Company, I believe.
Yep.
Tell us about what you do and what's going on in your world these days.
Great. So thank you for having me. Farlie Turner is an investment banking firm. We're located in South Florida, in a climate very much like sunny San Diego here today. And we work with companies to help them raise capital and also work with them to sell an interest in their business when they get to that point in their business life cycle.
Now, Craig, you and I met years ago, and you've been working the beer beat hard.
For a long time.
What got you into it, and what kinds of changes have you seen?
So, what I always tell people, Jeff, is what got me into it is beer. I noticed that my wine refrigerator at home was starting to fill up with 750s of beer, and I was subscribing to 5 or 6 different beer magazines out of general interest, and this light bulb went off in my head, and I said to myself, Craig, you could work in any industry you want. Why don't you work in something that you're really passionate about? And so I signed up as a BA member the next day and flew out here to San Diego in 2011 and have been, attending conferences and working with people in the industry ever since that time. And, seen a lot of changes, as you might imagine, from the industry really hitting an incredible growth spurt to the phase that we're going into now, which is getting a little bit more complicated and a little bit more difficult in terms of how to grow a business, but, still robust.
What are some of the challenges that you see the brewers facing these days?
I think a lot of people, Jeff, got into the business because they enjoyed beer and were brewing beer and loved the product, but maybe didn't have all the requisite business skills, if you will. And
they were
so
the prosumer aspect of the game.
Correct, and yes, exactly. But maybe they weren't experts in marketing, and so they brewed great beer, but they really didn't know how to sell it. And so now, in order to grow, you've got to be the complete package. You've got to make quality beer. That's a given. That's the minimum requirement. But then you've got to be able to figure out how do you get that beer to market? How do you show your image to the marketplace? How do you create that brand? And so, it's becoming a more complex business. And as the brewers around the country have gotten larger, that competition for shelf space has gotten much more intense.
But one thing about brewing that's been really interesting to watch as an observer is that there are brewers who aren't in it to grow, and there are a lot of them. And I wonder how that sort of competition dynamic is affecting them, as well as the folks who are in it to kind of be a regional power or a national power.
I think it all depends, as you say, on what your objectives are. If you want to create a local-oriented tap room, there's always going to be opportunity to do that. You're effectively opening a bar in which you're producing the raw materials. If you have ambitions that are bigger than that, though, I think you need to be more thoughtful about how you're approaching the industry today. And I do think that there are a lot of people out there who, as you said, may have just gotten in it because they enjoyed it and didn't really have a plan. We always, think about if you're growing a business and you don't have a business plan, it's like trying to fly a plane without a flight plan. If you don't know where you're going, it's going to be pretty hard. You may get there eventually, but it might be a really circuitous route.
Although, there are plenty of brewers who are just happy to kind of fly around because they love flying.
And you know what? It's a great lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. And it's getting harder, and I think that's because you have this real depth of players now. So you have people who have national ambitions or who want to build a dominant business plan, and you have these artisanal types who are just in it because they like to fly
And you've
around.
got the mega brewers who've gotten into it in a big way.
Yeah.
And so, you put all that together, and it means that, if you want to get distribution out there, you really have to work to find that right now.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is there is such a level of strategic development within the craft industry. There are many brands are getting snapped up by Budweiser. We've seen Heineken get into it. We've seen some of the Diageo get into it in a major way. How is that affecting competition for those brands that do want that growth capital?
So, that's an interesting question, because I think that a lot of what you saw maybe 2 or 3 years ago was brands that were growing solely because they were opening new markets.
Yep.
So,
Pipeline.
maybe it wasn't channel stuffing, but it was, a lot of room in the channel to open a new market and show 20% growth.
Yep.
When you have national players that are really well-oiled machines in terms of distribution, and they're going to market with, whether it's ABI with the high end that has their regional plays in the industry, or Constellation with Ballast Point, where they're pushing it nationally, it's making it more difficult for the smaller, more artisanal brewers to support those more far-flung markets. So I think that you are going to see, and you started to see already, people pulling out of markets that they don't have the feet on the street. Because, if you're competing in a market with ABI, with Miller Coors, with Constellation, with Sam Adams,
and with the strong regional that you're trying to invade.
All of whom have feet on the street, who are out there every day working the market. It's difficult to do if you are a Me Too or a brand that doesn't resonate in that particular geography.
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting tougher for like Joe's IPA to come in. Now, one of the other things, and I know you've done a lot of work with private equity. Look on the non-alc side, on the food side, private equity is, in many cases, they're just winning. They're beating the strategics. They're driving the market themselves. What about on the beer side?
Look, I think that the big strategics will have an inherent advantage because of the distribution aspect of the business, particularly in craft beer, in terms of what they can afford to pay. They may not want to pay it, but what they can afford to pay is probably more than private equity can. That being said, we've seen private equity be very competitive over the years, and have done a number of acquisitions. And what's interesting is on the non-alc side, you're also seeing some of the larger strategics set up their own venture firms, if you will.
Yeah, and Miller did that for a while with 10th Street as well.
With 10th and Blake.
Yeah.
Yep.
One final thing, one of the more, or a couple of the more exciting plays have been through Stone and certainly through Oscar Blues. Are we going to see some roll-ups here?
For sure. Yeah, no, I think you are in the process of whether it's Oscar Blues with Perrin and Cigar City, whether it is Enjoy Beer, which is looking for they've stated that they want to consolidate. There are some other players out there. Storied Craft Brewers is one that I think you'll be hearing about. There are some players out there, and there's more than enough breweries to go around. And I think what people have figured out is that in a market that is very competitive, there's strength in numbers. And so if you can use some shared services,
limit the back end cost.
Yeah, that's going to be an advantage.
Now, who does that affect more, the smaller brewers or the strategics whose market share has been eroding?
I'm not sure, because ultimately some of these consolidations could end up being a part of the strategics, especially when they have private equity money. To me, it's too early to tell right now, Jeff, what's going to happen to all these private equity plays in the industry. Right now, there's still BA-defined craft, but at the end of the day, the private equity firms are going to want they're going to want their return, right? And so they may end up being part of the larger strategics because they'll have size to them.
And so we're looking at another change in a few years.
I think inherently, just because that's the way private equity firms are set up, that they will have to recapitalize. Now, not all of them will sell to strategics. Some of them may sell to other consolidators. I think you may see one or two companies go public in the space. With valuations where they are today, that wouldn't be surprising to me. And then if they have a public currency to use, you could see someone go out there and do a number of acquisitions.
Well, I know that you'll be there with a hand in it.
Let's hope so.
So thanks for joining us, Craig.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.